Hello, and welcome back to Exit Stage Left. I'm your host, Alicia Trimble, and this is my co host and brother, John Trimble. Today, we're going to be going over the presidential debates that happened on September 12th, 2019. We are here in beautiful Kent Park in Johnson County, Iowa, in the middle of a butterfly migration, a monarch migration. So if you see a lot of stuff in the background, we purposely set up in front of those monarchs because it is just amazing out here.
It is. It really is.
So the debate, what did you think, John?
All right. Well, I thought it was actually kind of boring.
Yeah, but my main impression was that it was pretty boring, to be honest with you.
They agreed a lot, which I guess is good. The Delaney's are out.
Yeah, the Delaney's are out. So we only had the 10 highest polling Democrats last night. So that got rid of the Republican leaning Democrats. Yeah, they
Except for Biden.
Yeah, I guess Biden's probably the closest. So last night we had the three frontrunners who are Biden, Warren, and Bernie Sanders. And then we also had kind of the middle of the range, the Bookers, the Buttigiegs, the, who else do we have?
There was Beto, Harris.
Yeah.
Castro.
And then the Marianne Williams and the Delaney's did not make it to this one.
Did we mention Klobuchar?
Klobuchar was also in the race last night, you're right. Though she didn't make much of an impression, but we can get to that.
Minnesota nice, maybe. Too nice.
Too nice. So let's talk a little bit. You want to do this by topic, I think.
Yeah, they did talk about healthcare first.
Yeah. So I think the first question was about healthcare, and it was towards Biden, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did get the first say.
Question. So that he kind of ended up leading the question, and of course it was about his version of healthcare versus a universal single payer format that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren seem to prefer. Everyone's kind of adopting this Medicare for all idea because it's polling at an amazingly high value.
Exactly. It does seem that it's private insurance plus Medicare for all in some of the cases, though.
So, I don't know, like Buttigieg and Booker and Biden and everybody else is like, I want Medicare for all plus choice, or I want Medicare for all plus options. So everybody has been basically clamming on to the plan that was originally endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, I believe, was a co-sponsor on that bill. So now that they realize that everybody does really want to have healthcare coverage, it seems like everybody else is kind of adopting that.
Yeah.
The furthest away from that actually might have been Biden.
Yeah, he said that people don't want to give up their insurance. However, I think Bernie Sanders mentioned that out of the 149 million Americans that have private insurance, 50 will lose or change the insurance.
And Elizabeth Warren, I think, rightly mentioned that no one's in love with their insurance company. Like, there's 5 people who have a lot of stock in Blue Cross or Blue Shield or something. But otherwise, I like my doctor, I may like my hospital, I may like my specialist, but I don't care if Blue Cross or Aetna, or I would actually prefer that the federal government pay for it, because the federal government does not have an economic motivation to deny me health care that I need. So that was a little bit different.
Exactly, and I think Mayor Pete, too, also was well, he did say that Medicare for all doesn't trust people, and people need choice.
Yeah, the idea that we can't, okay, guys, here's the reality. The reason we have Social Security is because we couldn't trust you to save for your retirement. And to this day, I think it's like half of all people who, when they retire, have only their Social Security to live on. That's why we have Social Security. That's why the government had to come in and be a backup for you. That's also why the government had to come in and be a backup for health care for older people through Medicare and for poor people through Medicaid, because the system, because it's only built for people who can afford to pay, by its very nature leaves out part of the people, and we value people. So it's not even that we didn't trust you to retire, save for your retirement. If you just went through the Great Depression, you might have had a lot saved. You don't anymore. So anything can happen. In fact, wasn't W talking about this before the recession? And then the recession hit, and he stopped talking about it at all, about letting people invest their Social Security in the stock market.
Yeah, George Bush.
Yeah, George, was it the original Bush or W?
George W. Bush.
Yeah, because everyone who did that would have lost their nest egg. That's why the government does that. The government helps you save and allows you to have dignity, or at least some dignity, not as much as other first world countries, when you retire.
Exactly. And for picking your own insurance, what's the point? If Medicare is going to cover everything, why do you need to bother? You should be worrying about picking out your doctor and your specialist, not worrying about what insurance is going to cover what here and now.
Yeah.
This also, Yang did mention that hospitals, and I've worked for a hospital, and insurance waste a lot of time on going through paperwork. Exactly. One of the reasons, though, the private healthcare system is here, Warren claimed, is, and I believe it, that 23 billion was made on denying claims.
Yeah.
That's why private insurance has such a heavy hand in our healthcare, in lobbies. That's really, really, I mean, and that's why we need to get them out. I think Sanders and Warren actually were the strongest. Everyone, Biden has a plan, but I want to say, though, for instance, Castro was pretty vague, and Booker said, we'll just work together.
Yeah.
That wasn't exactly... I'm going to trust the ones that at least have a health care plan, and I think Warren and Sanders came out on top of that one.
Definitely.
Biden came out swinging, saying cost, cost, cost. I'm not going to say he didn't come out swinging on that. I didn't like his idea, but he did get on. He went with his son who had cancer and explained how horrible that was, and his son was lucky for insurance, though.
Yeah.
And if he had Medicare, he wouldn't need to worry about that, however. So.
Yeah, and there were a couple of points that were brought up. One is Biden actually seemed the weakest to me on healthcare, because it was brought up, and it is true that Biden's plan would still leave millions of Americans uninsured. I think Bernie Sanders estimated 10 million people. Okay, guys, it's not okay that someone in our country doesn't have insurance. They have the right not to use that insurance if they don't want to see a doctor or hospital. But just like people who want to homeschool their children, they have the right to homeschool their children, but we don't have a right to deny those children a public education should they need one.
I did like, however, that we're talking about this. It's a major Democratic platform now, and it's going to be hard for the Republicans to ignore this. And it's what the Democrats want. We're finally there. This is here. Obama, we can thank him for that. Obamacare had problems, mostly because Republicans wouldn't play ball. It was a Republican-designed plan done by the Heritage Foundation, and Obama let the Republicans run roughshod over designing the bill as long as they were willing to play ball, and then they didn't. So I'm very happy that they're on this, they're talking about it, and we're going in the right direction. We're now talking about how much private versus how much federal government we want involved. At least we're talking about everyone getting insured now, finally, and that's a beautiful thing. We have come a long way when we can say that, and I'm very happy for that.
No, that is wonderful. Another great, well, I don't know if it's a great exchange or an unfortunate exchange, was that Biden accused Bernie's plan of costing $30 trillion. The problem is the current plan costs us $50 trillion. And so Bernie's plan actually saves us $20 trillion right now over it's an extended amount of time. So it wasn't a very good argument on Biden's behalf. And there are also a lot of things that, if this were an in-depth weekend seminar where you could ask questions or something of these 10 candidates, there are things I would like to know that you couldn't necessarily get out of a debate, like how much right now do Americans pay for all their health care costs, including premiums, deductibles, co-pays, out-of-pocket expenses, all of those things that, I wouldn't doubt that it's not the same amount of money as Bernie's plan. I would actually bet it's a whole lot higher. And as we know, the rest of the world pays half as much. The rest of the developed world, what we used to call first world countries, pay oftentimes less than half and have a tremendously better outcome for their healthcare results than we do in the United States. Every bit of evidence, empirical or otherwise, states that the other developed countries in the world are doing it much, much better than the United States, and they're doing it for a much, much, much cheaper price. So our system just doesn't make any sense.
In fact, yeah, it was Sanders who said our healthcare system's absurd, and I think that's the best way to say it. A private company shouldn't get in the way of you and your doctor. Yeah. So overall, it did sound like Sanders and Warren had a solid plan, and the other ones wanted to keep private insurance with a supplement of Medicare, which Hey, in the end, it might lead to Medicare for all, but
It might not too. I mean, what I worry about if we don't go for single payer is that Obamacare was a great start. It would have been a better start and probably would have survived had a public option been involved. But what we saw was another administration come in and totally gut Obamacare, where we need to start a system where someone can't come in and take your insurance away from you like the Trump administration's done.
that is true. The Trump administration is trying to kill people. It's trying to bring
yeah.
back pre-existing condition clauses.
And when your premium goes up 5 times, that is the same for most people as losing their insurance because they can't pay it.
Trump and Senate could stop this right now. They could stop this. We could have a great healthcare system if President Trump would bother to have one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as he said, you wouldn't believe how tough it is, believe me. And he spent all afternoon trying to figure out healthcare and gave up on it, even though he had his promises stating that it would be cheaper and better than your current healthcare.
Yeah, well,
He lied.
He lied. That's very true.
So about race, there wasn't a whole lot said on that. I don't even think, for instance, Warren or Sanders got called on that. Beto did mention that slavery had built America, and through education, healthcare, everything is better for essentially white people, and minorities do have it worse. He did sponsor a reparations bill, or he wants to, excuse me. That's something he'd want to do. He's not in Senate or Congress, so he hasn't. Castro said police reform is needed, no more Eric Garners. Booker said it's not important who is a racist, but what we're going to do about it, essentially, because there is a problem with racism in the United States, and we know that it's going to stay. There is a systemic racism, and we need to figure out how to actually get through that, because it's always going to be here, and that's the problem with that. Mayor Pete said that the president's racist, and we need to raise the target for minority leadership. Harris, kind of a sketchy record being a prosecutor there.
Yeah.
So how much, that's hard to say because I'm not a prosecutor, and she probably, I mean, did she put away innocent people or people for longer than she should have? Her whole goal of being a prosecutor was to help people, so she does want police reform and no more for-profit prisons. She said she would do that. Klobuchar was accused of not siding with racial justice. She just basically denied the record. And Biden...
She was also a prosecutor. So.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Klobuchar was a prosecutor in Minnesota. And she was accused and pretty much denied it. They didn't spend a lot of time on the issue, actually. Biden basically said change the whole jail model, and no one goes to jail for drugs. It sounds good, but it's just...
Biden is the major reason, one of the major reasons, and not just the only reason, but all of the senators and congressmen who originally voted for that Crime Bills Act, that we have jails just teeming with non-violent drug offenders. Not selling drugs, just possessing them and taking them. So I thought that was a little, he's right, but I didn't hear him take any responsibility for what happened.
Exactly. And Booker had mentioned the jail system's broken. They didn't really spend a lot of time on this. They didn't even let them respond very well with their answers, so it was kind of a small segment, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. There seemed to be a few times we were going to touch on something different from other debates or other mainstream media talking points, but really we get on something like this and then it'd be over.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
They did talk about shootings.
Yeah, there's been 3 major shootings. There's probably been 30 or 40 mass shootings in the United States, I'm willing to bet, if not more.
In the last, how long, you think?
Yeah, since the last debate.
Yeah.
I mean, that weekend after we filmed the last video from the last debate, there were 8 mass shootings in 2 days the next weekend, including
there was El Paso
and Dayton. And then there was another one that were, I think, 8 or 9 people were shot in New York, plus other mass shootings where at least 4 people were shot in the United States.
And Dayton, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but I think 32 people were shot. A couple of them might have been accidentally shot by police, but essentially 32 people got shot in 30 seconds. That's just crazy. That's not the weapons that you would imagine.
Well, and this goes to the good guy with the gun argument. We had a lot of good guys right there with guns, and they still couldn't stop a mass shooter before he took out
about 30 people
in 30 seconds.
It's disgusting. And
by the time you can reach for your gun, a dozen people will already be dead.
Exactly. There were talk about buybacks. That was kind of interesting. Biden said he would beat the NRA, and
We've been trying for a long time.
You know, interesting though. He said not by executive order unless constitutional scholars okayed it, but he also was in on the original ban back in the 90s. He's old enough there, so he
Yeah.
has fought the NRA. He's right. He's the only one. He's also a bit older than everyone else. Well, not Sanders, of course, but or Warren. But as a senator, he's been there a while. So that was interesting. I don't know. I think he's just giving more lip service.
Yeah. You know, in the case of the NRA and with healthcare too, the major problem is the amount of money those industries and a lot of under industries give to candidates, presidential candidates, as well as candidates for about every other office, including state and sometimes local offices in the United States. And they're really beholden to that money. And I think, in this case, I think Warren brought it up a little more, but Sanders has brought it up probably a million times that the only way to really stop these problems we have in our society is to get the money out of politics.
Get the money out of politics. They also, Sanders and Warren both mentioned get rid of the filibuster, and that way you'll get 51 senators most likely, because you need a supermajority now, and that's impossible.
Yeah.
They had 54 at one time, I think Warren was saying, and that's not enough.
Yeah.
So the majority of Americans wanted this, but because the Senate held it up and the minority ruled the day.
And it is, I believe, 96% of Americans want background checks on all transactions. So there's no gun show loophole. There's no personal purchasing between individuals, like what just happened with that shooter and the other, not in El Paso, the other Texas shooting. Midland, wasn't it Midland?
That was the El Paso, or was it? No, there was one.
There was that guy who got fired in the morning. They're all blending together.
I'm sorry, they do blend together, and that's sad. He stole the postal office truck, and it was Midland, Odessa area, I believe.
Yeah.
And what the heck?
And I believe that is where
Isn't that sad? They're blending together.
Yeah. And was it Beto who did mention it was either that shooting or the El Paso one? I can't remember. Where there weren't enough ambulances, so a woman watched her daughter bleed out over the course of an hour because of the ammunition you're allowed to buy in the United States. Or was that Buttigieg? That might have been Buttigieg.
It might have been Buttigieg, yeah.
I'm sorry. I believe it was. And, he's right. We use those kinds of bullets in warfare. So when someone's shooting at our soldiers, we can shoot back, and when we hit them, they can't get up and shoot us. And
the fact is there's not enough ambulances to handle mass shooters.
Yeah. And so when we talk, everyone's like, when Republicans talk about, how to regulate guns, and they say it's mental health, or in this case, ambulances. Well, if it is those things, why the hell haven't you done anything about it? Why isn't there mental health provided by the government that is thorough and works and done on a fully compensated level? Why aren't there enough ambulances in our community if mass shootings are just going to happen? It's one of the reasons I believe that they definitely don't believe that, because if they did and at least had part of a conscience, they would do something about it, but they're not, because that isn't the issue.
What do you think about video games?
I think Japan has a lot of video games and they don't have any mass shootings. Your chances of getting shot into Japan are about the same as getting hit by a bolt of lightning. Now, when people send their kids out to school, maybe it's thundering lightning, they worry a little bit, but you don't usually think your kid's going to die of lightning strike that day.
Beto probably had the most extreme measure here with a mandatory buyback of assault weapons.
Yeah, Beto, when he was asked, basically, would you take away assault rifles? And he said, yes, I will take away AK-47s and AR-15s.
And that's going to cause problems. I think that's actually it's his new shtick after El Paso. He's reinvented himself around this gun issue. But I think it's a bad idea. I think mandatory buyback, basically confiscating people's property. Once we allowed it, we let the cat out of the bag. I can understand banning them again, but forcing people to give up property by the government?
Yeah, we disagree on this slightly. I don't know if I'd be as extreme as Beto would be, but, we have a machine gun ban. We do not have a machine gun ban in the United States. You can buy a fully automatic machine gun. You just have to go through another steps that were put in place in the 1930s. Yeah. And it is totally legal for an upstanding citizen of the United States to own and use a machine gun for target practice. When's the last time you've seen a mass shooting with machine gun? You don't, because they have appropriate steps, precautions, licensing, and background checks so that people who shouldn't have these guns get their hands on these guns.
It is interesting, the bump stocks, which made basically an assault weapon into like a machine gun, they banned bump stocks really quick, and Trump was on that.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Once something becomes like a machine gun, they get scared.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was right after Las Vegas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so I think that was like, okay, we'll give you a little bit.
A little bit.
Because that was the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States.
However, I think this is red meat to Republicans. This is what they've wanted all the time, and this is why militias form. They
Yeah.
really fear that the federal government's going to come and take your guns. And now the federal government is threatening to come get your guns if Beto's there.
Yeah.
And this is going to feed into the Republican talking points till no end. This is probably the worst decision Beto could have done.
So, yeah. So, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's going to cause all Republicans now to say every Democrat wants to take your guns.
So this is where I disagree a little bit. I don't know if I'd be as extreme as Beto, but I do think that we've got to stop Democrats have to stop being like, okay, we want background checks on all sales, and then you have Republicans going, we want no restrictions whatsoever on guns. I think we have to start further left than background checks. I think we have to start with actually talking about banning some of these weapons if we're going to make a compromise just to get to background checks.
Banning, well, confiscating, you mean, not banning. You want to
Good.
confiscate weapons.
Well, no, if we even start back at banning weapons, like, okay, after this date, there will be no more our semi-automatic weapons sold in the United States, or that you have to go through the same regulations you do to get a fully automatic weapon, then I think just starting from that point, not necessarily confiscating, but starting from that point, would give us a lot more leverage to just at least get to background checks.
Well, I think
We always start at the point of compromise where we're like, we can all get along, and then, the Republicans can just say, no, we're not doing any of that. Too bad.
Attacking the main issue, though, the NRA's main reason for existing is the government's going to take your gun. And now we're feeding into the NRA.
Wow.
We're feeding the troll.
That's what people think. The actual job of the NRA is a lobby for the gun industry. That's
Yeah.
who funds it. That's where they get all their money. They pay the NRA to be the visible bully.
Exactly. I do think Beto needs... This is horrible, though, for the democratic process, or the democratic debates here. This isn't starting far left. This is stealing people's property who they bought legally, and there shouldn't be a problem with them owning it legally, and there's not.
The government can take away your land for public domain if it's needed for a public good. Now, if the public good is saving people's lives, now they have to pay full market value for that. But and this Beto is talking about a mandatory buyback, so they would be paying probably full market value for the weapon. So there is precedence for it in other areas. And our Constitution actually widely kind of recognizes the right to property, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or in other parts, life, liberty, and property, which the pursuit of happiness originally was property. So, I mean, there is precedent in other types of government areas for this type of confiscation of other items.
I don't think the court system as is would even see it like that.
Well, the court system right now is activist.
Is right-wing activist.
Activist, yes.
I do think solutions would be a voluntary buyback at a crazy price.
I know.
I think $20,000 for something you paid a few $100s for. People would for money, people will do anything, and they will put their guns in if you give them a crazy price. Another solution would be to actually show the dead bodies. This one's a bit extreme, but how did we get troops home from Vietnam? Well, there was body bags in the background of Dan Rather. We saw horrible things that happened in Vietnam. We hide this.
And actually, since the Iraq War, there's actually been a prohibition on showing
the first Iraq War.
The first Iraq War, showing bodies that come back, and if that's not an egregious affront to the First Amendment, certainly saying that and a law originally just meant to stop standing armies. The Second Amendment does say well-regulated militia. That infringes a lot more in the First Amendment than saying you can only have guns that don't kill lots and lots of people for your personal use does on the Second Amendment.
I think another thing is those commercials that show the abused dogs. Well, we could also show shot people.
Yeah.
These candidates, Beto has money. He could start doing this. He could start campaigning on showing children that were shot. Michael Moore in that Bowling for Columbine, They went into Target, or Kmart, excuse me, at the time, and got them to stop selling handgun bullets when victims came up to them. If victims can make themselves known, something can be done, but we hide this. For some reason, Democrats want to play like, we just need to ban them. Well, a lot of people with assault weapons have never seen the result of what those assault weapons can do because they've never seen what a room full of dead kindergartners or whatever,
And
first graders.
A while back, and I apologize, I don't know the young man's name, but Rolling Stone had one of the victims, I believe, of Parkland on the cover, showing in full glory the colostomy bag he now has to wear thanks to that shooter. I do think a lot of those things would be very, very helpful if we showed those more. I think there's some blocks. First of all, there's idea that people are they just don't want to see gore. They also, I mean, we show shooting all the time on television. We don't show the actual results of what happens when you get shot in the head.
I think we need to be brutally clear, too, that at some point in the future, a man will walk in with an assault rifle and kill another class of first graders.
Oh, yeah.
To shoot them all in their head, kill the teacher, and they'll be crying, there'll be bloodiness, and there'll be death, and there's not going to be stopped in time.
So,
and that's going to
yeah.
happen with an assault rifle, and we as Americans totally accept this right now.
Yeah, and so one of the things, John and I have been working on production for another video we hope to do for you guys on the history of gun legislation, or at least gun legislation throughout time in the United States, because what you're told now isn't exactly true. For instance, I mentioned that the Second Amendment was actually written to stop a standing army. They just took that line out, and they took out the fact that it was supposed to be a federal militia rather than a state militia, just to make the southern slave states happy so they could keep their slave patrols. And so what really shocked me when I started to do this research is that Noontown wasn't the first time an elementary school has been shot up and there's been massive fatalities. It happened several times throughout the 70s, 80s, when it was adults rather than, I believe that, well, the other man was an adult, but he was a young adult. It was other men who were, yes, probably really mentally ill, but, you know, this wasn't the first time that elementary schools have been shot up like this, and I was horrified, and I was so pissed. I was texting John, and I was so angry. Why don't I know that there's been a history of shooting up elementary schools in the United States? It's absolutely an American tradition at that point. So yes, there will be another mass shooting in an elementary school where a bunch of first graders, kindergartners, second graders, whoever, are mowed down because we failed to do something about gun legislation, and that could very well be your child next time.
Let's see, they did mention immigration.
Immigration. So yeah, immigration.
They didn't really talk too much about that. That's another short one, like race.
Yeah.
Biden said, or he was asked, why should Latinos trust Biden? Because there was a lot of, under Obama, he did deport a lot of immigrants. However, I do think that was to appease the Republican Congress. We have to remember,
Yeah,
a president is bound to his Congress,
Yeah.
or their Congress.
Yeah, well, and this is what drives me nuts. It was absolutely to appease a Republican Congress. Also, at the time, Obama's talking points on this was, we're only deporting criminals, and this is not civil crime, this is actually, you know, real crime that they were talking about at the time, or new arrivals. So if Biden would just say we were only deporting criminals, or we are only deporting criminals and new arrivals, he wouldn't be babbling on and on in these
He
debates.
did
But
babble.
I don't know, like, has his staff not told him this? Just say this, Joe. You know, we only deported the people who are dangerous to other people in the United States. That would solve all of his problems.
Joe talks too much.
Yeah.
He did bring up DACA, though, so we have to remember that he was part of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Was he part of it? Because when it was something people liked, he was part of it. When it was something he didn't like, he was only the vice president.
That's actually what Castro said. And he blames Biden. That's what Castro did. He just went after Biden. Even though Castro was in the administration, by being in the administration, you're agreeing with the president because you serve at the president's pleasure. Warren called for fair citizenship and fix a system so it doesn't think a 12-year-old is a terrorist. Why do we treat a 12-year-old immigrant as a terrorist and throw them into a cage? Well, we know why. It's because Trump's being really cruel to get them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feeds into the racist, the racist Republican system that is there.
I'm going to say this from my leftist point of view. I have never understood why people get mad at people who travel to another country to feed their children. What I really think, or to seek medical care, which I talked about last night, I really think if you are a parent and you are in the same economic circumstances that these parents are, and you wouldn't cross a made-up line to another country to get a job to feed your own children, you're not a good parent. These parents are simply trying to provide for their children or trying to get their children health care or whatever it may be, but they are trying to be the best parents they can under the circumstances. It occurs to me that some of these people who are angry at immigrants wouldn't be good parents.
I don't think that's leftist. I think that's human.
That's human? All right.
Yeah. And I agree with you. To be a good parent goes to extreme lengths, going across the imaginary line.
Mm-hmm.
Yang said that immigration is positive and he wants to return to the legal levels of Obama. And Yang's father was born as a peanut farmer and lived in a dirt shack.
Yeah, Shrek with the dirt floor. And I think he is right. A lot of, well, as he said, half of the Fortune 500 startups have been immigrants. And it's true.
The best immigrate because they want to get out and do something better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's the best who come here. It's not the worst, not the rapist. It's Trump is lying. And Pete, Mayor Pete, he said anyone who supports Trump's wall is racist. So he just made a claim there. Basically, if you vote for Trump, you're a racist. That's pretty bold, Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get elected so he can say these things, but...
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with him, but it is right. A lot of people who vote for Trump don't see themselves as racist.
I know quite a few Republicans, actually, and they actually believe they're doing right. I don't agree with their logic on it, but they actually believe that, well, Democrats are the racist, for instance, and that a welfare state is how you hold black people down and whatnot. I disagree with it, but they actually believe that Fox News and whatnot is so fearful that they're voting Republican is the only way to protect America from falling into a Venezuela or a Cuba. They honestly believe that. So a lot of it is fear. And that's sad, but it's the truth.
Yeah, but small secret to let you all know that most of the people who are on welfare are white people. Just keeping it real. All right, we can go on now.
Beto called for harmonizing entry like we do into Canada, so there would be more of a... So when legal immigrants or legal people with a visa came into the United States and overstay, it would be simpler to track, just like Canada. And that's pretty much it. I don't believe they called on too many other people. It was just a quick run through.
Yeah, I don't think they called... Did they call him Bernie for this one?
I don't believe they did.
Yeah, he got left out there for quite a while.
And on to tariffs?
Sure.
All right. Yang said we need to hammer out a deal. Tariffs stay at the beginning at least. It seemed actually everyone's okay with the tariffs. Tariffs were always not necessarily anti-democratic in certain ways.
Well, and I didn't agree with him totally. I mean... I think the easiest thing, you can't just say I'm withdrawing these tariffs with no conditions. I mean, I think you at least have to go to China, say, okay, guys, if we drop our tariffs, will you drop your tariffs? And get that kind of agreement. Like, we can just go back to what we were doing before Trump went nuts and expected no one to retaliate with tariffs.
Well,
it's crazy.
Yeah, like Pete said, mentioned Trump failed at making deals with China, and he said he was going to make a deal. So... he makes us look bad. He makes us look bad in front of our allies by Trump saying this. And if we can't keep him everyone knows that Trump can't keep his word. That means the United States can't keep our word. And we have failed in making a deal with China. Now Trump's criticism is he'll just wait for a Democrat to come along. So we know there's not going to be even any kind of deal China's willing to make until after the next election period. China, I'm not against tariffs or putting out a better deal, but tweet diplomacy is just idiotic, and that's what we have here. Let's see, Klobuchar wants more focused tariff, work with the world, and that's something there, a focused tariff.
She was in support of the steel tariffs, wasn't she?
Yeah,
Okay.
And so that there is reasons for tariffs, and China does get some over on America, with especially the intellectual property, through tariffs and whatnot.
Yeah, but I'm going to say it again. Part of the deal with our deals with China was we basically get slave labor in exchange for giving them our intellectual property. In other words, they're not just stealing it. We signed an agreement that says you have a right to our intellectual property. And the fact that a few of the Democratic candidates didn't necessarily notice that is kind of an issue for me. I can see why it makes people mad that other people use intellectual property that isn't theirs. But that's actually partially the fault of the deals that were made by the United States.
Castro did say there was a haphazard way that Trump is hurting the U.S. and we need to ratchet the trade war down and focus on human rights. And sometimes we forget in the United States that China is a dictatorship and is abusing human rights, amazingly. We saw what's happening in Hong Kong recently, and China will take that over in probably another 25 years here. And the Uyghur population, Uyghur,
The Uyghur?
yeah, about 1 million of them are in concentration camps currently.
Mm-hmm.
Warren did have an interesting thing. She said the trade system is broke because it's made for giant corporations. And that's
It is.
true. It's
It
not
is.
made for you or me. It's made for the Trumps of the world. It's made for Boeing. It's made for even McDonald's. Yeah, and of course, Bernie, NAFTA was bad. That was pretty much what he had to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Harris said no more tweeting on out trade and regulation rules, which
Yeah, which we've all said. I like everyone, even like the crankiest Republican has said. And
yeah. Booker had some interesting things. Trump is isolating more than helping America, and that's true.
It is true.
Like, I think it was, Mayor Pete mentioned that it makes us look bad when we're acting like idiots and crying about trade deals and not producing anything. He failed. Trump has failed. He did make a funny joke about Canada because we put, the United States said Canada was a national security threat in order to levy tariffs on them. And Booker said the only thing menacing about Trudeau is his hair because Booker is bald. That was hilarious.
Yeah, I saw someone say it was a really bad joke and they'd give him a lower grade for that, but I did think it was kind of funny because Trudeau is known for his hair, and I imagine Corey has a shaved head because he can't grow much hair, so I thought
Exactly.
it was kind of funny.
It was funny. War in Afghanistan. That's been in the news lately. President Trump was going to have a secret meeting days before the anniversary of 9/11 at Camp David, inviting the people who killed 3,000 people on the Twin Towers to Camp David.
Yeah, no, I think
That's
we
sickening.
were all a little shocked like this. It's probably just led to John Bolton's resignation, and despite what the right is saying, all liberals are happy that John Bolton is gone. In fact, we all did a happy dance. It's so crazy that the left was shocked, but so was John Bolton.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how crazy that was.
I believe Tucker Carlson tried to say that
it was
Bolton
Tucker. That's
was a
where
leftist.
it was. That's where I was remembering that from.
Tucker said that he was a big government. No, Republicans love big government when it works for them, and they love the military.
They
and
do.
so
The
that was-
Republicans love big government more than anybody else. I mean, let's face it. But no liberal anywhere like Bolton. Okay, a lot of conservatives didn't like Bolton. Like I said, every liberal did a little happy dance when John Bolton
Exactly.
was out of the White House.
Goodbye mustache.
Yeah.
And so, okay, here we go. Warren, bring him home now. No conditions. She just wants to bring him home now because no one can describe victory. She did talk about that. Yeah, when she goes over there, what is victory? And what is victory in Afghanistan now? I don't have a clue what it is over these last.
Yeah. Well, none of us do. It's like Vietnam.
18
Only
years.
it's been going on a lot longer than Vietnam.
Well, in Vietnam, there was a clear-cut goal. We were going to make South Vietnam safe for democracy. There is not even that goal.
Yeah.
What are we doing? We decided not to engage the Taliban fully because you can't do that. Every invading force from Alexander the Great has lost, and now it's America's turn. It's time to come home.
Never start a land war in Asia. I believe
Yeah.
someone really wise said that once in a movie.
Mayor Pete, the only veteran, I think, on the stage there.
Yeah, because
he-
Tulsi wasn't in this debate.
He
So.
actually served under the general that they were talking about. I can't remember the general's
And he
name.
said, wait, under the general, which is a
Exactly.
little funny.
He was a bit shaky on his call, but he did say there should be a 3-year authorization for overseas. So that meant every 3 years Congress would have to reauthorize it. That's a plan.
I actually, my opinion is it should probably actually be 2 years because every 2 years the Army has to be reauthorized.
That would make more sense.
Yeah, I'm fine actually if the Navy doesn't have to be reauthorized, but the Army kind of goes crazy.
And let's see here. What did we have? Biden.
Mm-hmm.
This one's weird. Now, he did make a point that Afghanistan is not actually one country. It's split into so many different territories, and Pakistan has 3 provinces, so it's actually, part of it's even part of Pakistan. He wants to prop up Pakistan and give it more weapons to hold down Afghanistan. We've been doing that for a long time, and it didn't solve anything, and now Pakistan has nuclear weapons.
The one thing I will say about leaving Afghanistan, and this is just my opinion, I do believe we should be out of there, but I think we have to do it thoughtfully. And you are going to have to bring a lot of immigrants in from Afghanistan who helped us, because otherwise they're going to be killed for helping us. And bringing them here, along with every single family member and even friends they need to bring with them to save their lives, is absolutely necessary. And yes, the government needs to pay for that because we're the ones who started this whole thing.
Biden also regrets the the voting for the Iraq War.
At
Sanders
least he
proudly
said
said, "I didn't vote."
Which is very true, and he He's been very much against that war from the beginning, and he has also been very much against any funding that's gone to that war.
And luckily, Obama ended the Iraq War. And we know that Trump has wanted to end. I mean, both Obama and Trump said they were going to end the Afghanistan war. It's just that the generals say it shouldn't be ended. And unfortunately for Obama, the Republicans wouldn't let him go. And now the Republicans are just quietly letting Trump get him out, because that's what happens. When Nixon came in, we got out of Vietnam because the Republicans, who were the biggest war hawks, will let a Republican get out of war because they can always claim the mantle of freedom and patriotism later.
Yeah.
And Yang signed a pledge to end forever wars. And so Yang is out of that, or wants out. They didn't get to the other ones like Klobuchar, but pretty much it seems like they want out. And that seems to be the most popular position in America right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Republicans want out too. So that's actually, it's kind of like gun control. Most of us want it.
I'm not sure who mentioned it, but someone said that a kid now is 18, was born after 9/11, and can serve in Afghanistan.
I think it was Buttigieg, but I'm not
sure.
sure.
I think it is. So Buttigieg said that this kid who has no idea what happened, except from the history books, who are ancient to an 18-year-old. If you weren't alive when it happened and you're 18, it's ancient history.
But you can fight that war now.
Yeah, so that's scary.
Very good point.
That's scary. And Buttigieg is in his later 30s, and he fought in that war. Think about that. That's the war. The military has changed so much. The same people aren't even in the military anymore.
Yeah. It's a generation.
Yeah. It did seem like they put kind of Latinos and climate change together. This was an odd one. They asked some people about climate change and other people about Latinos.
Yeah,
so,
I think it might have been because those were those questions being asked more from the Telemundo
it was
interviewer.
the Telemundo,
So I think they might have just gotten clubbed together because he was the one asking the questions. And they're right. Both of these topics deserve a lot more time than they've been getting, and they deserve a lot more time than they got last night. So
Sanders was challenged on not condemning Maduro in Venezuela, and kind of said that's a false equivalency because socialism in Venezuela is not, it's a dictatorship. It's a totalitarian dictatorship. It's not social democracy, and it's stupid to compare that.
Yeah, and so they had the standard Republican talking point last night, like, how are you different than Maduro? Or how are you different from Stalin? We've all heard this. Like, how are you the Nazis were socialists? No, they weren't, okay? There are dictators, there are oligarchs, and there's real socialism, democratic socialism. And I'm so tired of this talking point when they're like, well, you like people like this. Those aren't socialists, those are dictators.
Are those Canadian socialists? Not really, they're capitalists.
Yeah.
So are the Nordic countries.
Yeah.
But according to many people, apparently if we do what they do, we become socialist.
Yeah.
Castro actually did call Maduro a dictator, and he actually wanted a Marshall-type World War II plan to help El Salvador and Venezuela, and also to combat China, which is always in...
Yeah.
China has always been meddling in South America and trying to get a better deal than America.
It's not even that. In Africa and everywhere, like when we're going around taking money that we had been previously doing to help the right things happen in this country away, not focusing enough on humanitarian aid and those sorts of things. China's doing all of those things. And that means China's gaining the influence in those countries, which means China's becoming a bigger and bigger world power.
What happens is China comes in and gives you a loan, and then a loan you can't repay, and then they own you.
Yep.
And so instead of
the World Bank doing it, they're doing it.
Yeah, and while that's not appropriate, and America shouldn't be doing that, we should be there to offer assistance so China can't get that leg up. And then we'll have the influence, not bend them over the barrel, for instance, but we will have the influence of goodwill. And plus, with South America, we have so many immigrants from South America, it makes sense that we also have really close ties. It's familia in a certain way.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's see, now this goes a little bit weird. They asked Booker about him being vegan. I think especially because
he shut that down pretty well, though.
Yeah, I think he said no, and he said he would translate it into Spanish. No.
It was kind of weird because everybody was like waiting for a pause. Like, are you going to say no more than no? No. He just said no, which was funny. I do feel like he had a couple of funnies.
Yeah, the hair thing. Yeah, he was probably the funniest.
He seemed more relaxed in this debate than any of the others.
Yeah, he looked better. Basically, his biggest thing is to be against corporate factory farming. Beto said climate change is here, and he wants to make changes to the greenhouse emissions. He had some plans for that. He got his second to talk. It wasn't really much. They were just blowing through this one. Klobuchar said global warming action is needed now,
Yeah.
and get us back into the climate accords gas mile standard. She actually had a shtick for this and ran it out. So one of the few times she like ran with something well and got something done.
Yeah.
That was her only time she
Yeah.
really.
Both
Sounded
Bernie
presidential.
and Elizabeth Warren have very good plans on this. They just didn't really come up last night in the debate.
Yang said get rid of lobbyists. And that actually, if we get rid of
and the
lobbyists,
corruption.
yeah, if you end corruption, we the people get a vote on what we want rather than lobbyists telling our representatives. So if you get rid of the corruption, we'll actually get rid of a lot of the problems we have, including hog houses and stuff. They all pretty much said that we need to cut emissions. Harris said man-made climate change is bad and Republicans do nothing. We all know that's
Yeah,
true.
I mean that's one of the things about last night's debate is there's a lot of we already know that.
Yeah, I agree. That's why it was so boring.
Yeah,
It was,
they didn't get into the differences as much as they got into the similarities.
even the gun control when Beto wanted his mandatory buyback, the others were like, I wouldn't do that, but
Okay.
let's see, education.
Yeah.
Okay, so Yang, accused of charter school love, says he is for good school, whether
Yeah.
it's public or not. He is an industrialist and capitalist and has been accused of loving it, but he made a point that he believes in good schooling.
I don't have kids, and I am more than happy to pay for your kids to go to get a public
Exactly.
education. Okay, guys, because it's the right thing to do for our society. We're
Not
all
only-
better off.
Yeah, it's actually even a greedy way a bit. We can be altruistic at it, but also if your kid makes money, that's going to help us all pay more taxes and we all get more benefits out of it.
Yeah.
Not
And-
only is it altruistic, we get money from it.
And your kids aren't running around doing
Your kids get a
stuff,
proper education so they
vacation,
can
yeah.
make money. It's good for everyone in the end.
Yeah.
Education is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
Mayor Pete said appoint a Secretary of Education who believes in actual public education, so that was a nice touch
Yeah.
there.
I think a few people made that comment actually.
Warren, who was a public school teacher, and she got into the heart of that. Warren actually, I think, came out a winner in this because she had 3 brothers in the military and
Went to school down the road.
went to school down the road. I guess we'll get into the winner after this, but I just wanted to mention
Yeah.
because she really just came alive during the teacher thing, which is her shtick. I mean, she's
Yeah.
good at it, and she won this little bit here too, I think, overall, but we'll get to that. Harris said focus on minority education, which is always good because that's going to get people out of poverty. It's not the only thing, but of course, her being a prosecutor and also being a person of color, she understands this way more than I ever could, and I would listen to her on her goals here. Sanders, of course, comes in and says teachers should make at least $60,000 and get either should be universal pre-K and debt-free college. Well, that's great education right there. Yang also had an interesting story where a person from Japan really wanted to be a school teacher. And she took the test and she just missed, but she had a fallback. She became a doctor.
Yeah, and in other countries, teachers are well paid, so they get the best.
Not only that, but they're on the level of a doctor. Okay, a doctor is one of the most respected professions in the United States of America. Think about a school teacher being on the same level as a doctor. The
Yeah,
same
that's how
amount
we
of respect.
should teach.
That's how we should
Yeah,
look at it. In
that's how we
Japan,
should
they
look
do.
at
And that's amazing. But now school teachers are just another job. There's nothing special about a school teacher in the United States.
Yeah, and we have that phrase: "If you can't do, teach."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really seen. It started with Reagan, and teachers became the whipping boys, or basically they became the whipping boys for everything that was wrong with children. It wasn't that Reagan was cutting lunch programs and education and funding, and schools were getting cut, and it was the 1980s. They just blamed it on the teachers, and a lot of people were blindsided about it and said, "Yeah, you must be right.
Well, how many
I'm
times
not going to
have-
actually raise my children. Why isn't the teacher doing it?"
How many times have you heard that liberal indoctrination at schools? What do you mean, the truth?
Yeah, I know. Facts aren't liberal indoctrination. They're
just
truth.
facts,
Yeah,
yeah.
And honestly, even if you get the liberal indoctrination that a lot of conservatives talk about, it's not the whole truth. They whitewash it so you don't really understand the cruelty that's involved in a lot of these issues.
Exactly. Biden talked about ending economic segregation, which schools are heavily segregated. You can do that easily by just readjusting your school district, and the richer people the more affluent happen to be white are going to end up in the better school system, and their property taxes pay for more. I think they said something like $2,300 per student more in some districts. The disparity is amazing.
Yeah, the disparity is absolutely amazing. If you add, some schools have a couple thousand kids, so if you add that up, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and Biden's for teacher raises. Castro is not for charter schools, but would keep them. I mean, they're already here, so that kind of makes the point. And Booker said find local solutions, but of course he had Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg help him.
Yeah, so I don't know the whole story, but that was one of the things that was brought up right after in media is that Booker, was I'm the only mayor who has like taken over school system and made it better. Well, it immediately came out that at least there was a huge amount of money from Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know in what amounts or how that money was gathered. I honestly don't even know if Zuckerberg is from Newark. I have no idea. But if Booker just talked him into giving the money, and maybe he is a good guy for this sort of thing, but I don't know that's the truth. And he certainly didn't do it without the help of others.
And that money just doesn't happen to every school district.
No,
It's
that is,
not going to happen.
Zuckerberg isn't going to give money to, Clear Lake, Iowa. They're not.
Yeah, and this happens to inner city schools that are really bad, but there's also really rural schools that have
Yeah.
no education as well. So,
Yeah.
and it can be across the spectrum of race and inner city, outer city, middle towns have the same problem.
Yeah.
Schools need better funding, and at least they're talking about it. So I'm really happy that the Democrats here are talking about education, healthcare, ending wars, race, shootings. It seems like they actually talked about, why it was so boring is they talked about all the things we wanted to hear and agreed with everyone.
Yeah, they didn't really. They talked about issues that are important to Democrats. I will give you that, but they didn't get into enough of the nitty gritty so we could know the real differences on some
They
of those
don't have
issues.
time. But these issues are actually for the American people.
Yeah.
Tax cuts for corporations don't benefit the majority of Americans. So when Republicans talk about that, it's boring.
Yeah, but I wish they'd talk about something more specific like corruption in politics. Like how would you stop the money, and if so, how would you do that?
I don't think we'll ever get the mainstream media to ask them such questions like
Yeah.
that. That's just, they try to trap them with, are you a socialist supporter?
Yeah, that's not. We're not going to fix any of these issues until we have. Until money isn't speech. I'm sorry. Even if money is speech, people have a lot less speech than most corporations do, just because of the pocketbooks they have.
Exactly.
So it's an absolutely horrific ruling from the Supreme Court. It makes absolutely no sense. It needs to be revisited, and we actually need a constitutional amendment to keep money out of politics.
Yeah, we do. So winners.
Winners. I think I would give Warren the winner.
Yeah, I do like how she talked about she may be from Oklahoma, but she went to school right down the road from where the debate was in Houston. She had 3 brothers who served in the military. She was a special ed teacher. She played the all-American mom who was a teacher.
And she just seemed in her element. Like she was talking, it was a good night for her.
Yeah, Sanders, while I liked all of his ideas, had a hoarse voice, which kind of hurt him a bit.
Yeah, and they just forgot to talk to him for a while there. They were asking Warren stuff. I almost felt like they were butting out Sanders in favor of Warren, and that is by no means Elizabeth Warren's fault. The media is not fond of Bernie Sanders.
I think they did, yeah.
But he wasn't allowed to shine. So I don't think he had a bad night. I think he had a less visible night, which was not his fault.
Overall, I think all of them did pretty good. I can't say, I was not liking Kamala Harris before, but I don't say throw her off the stage this time.
Yeah, I wasn't any more impressed by Harris than I was last time, which is to say not a whole lot. Castro's dig on Biden did bother me a lot. He jumped. He did jump after Joe about not remembering something he said 2 minutes ago. There has been a lot of worry, honestly, that Joe Biden is sundowning or his mind is slipping with age, which does happen to some people at his age. But the dig he made seemed a little cruel to me. And Buttigieg actually jumped on him, but it was more like, I don't think Buttigieg jumped on him to jump on him. It was more like, hey, guys, we all need to get along. And that seemed a little rehearsed as well on Buttigieg's part.
Yeah, I don't think there's quite enough evidence to say Biden is sundowning, but I think sometimes Joe is just happy Joe and kind of, he's always been mouthy.
Mouthy, or he's got a lot of, they call him gaffes.
Yeah, but he's just mouthy. I think he's always been that way. And that's part of the reason that Obama picked him was he was mouthy and could be an attack dog, and he made gaps that were just kind of fun. And not all of his gaps are fun.
He was a great vice president. He was always like, oh, Joe, but it's not necessarily who I want to be president. And I will say his policies are a lot like Hillary Clinton. And though Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote last time, she did not win by enough to get enough electoral votes, honestly. And I'm afraid if we run the same candidate, Trump may win again.
Exactly. Overall, do you think there's anyone who should exit stage right here?
I don't. Klobuchar.
She was.
I
kind of not there.
Not there, and I just don't think. She's got a lot left to say. Castro, he can't be polling very well. Well, he can't, at least 2%, I guess, to be in this.
Personally, I thought he did better.
You thought you thought he did better. He stood out a little more because of his
More
comments.
visible, yeah.
You know, to me, really, there's 3 people left in the race, and that is Sanders, Warren, and Biden. The rest are fairly equal to me. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I thought they were all more
Castro,
polished.
I guess if I had to kick 2 out, I'd kick out Castro and Klobuchar. Yang, I think, is just really interesting to have on the stage because he brings some perspectives. I like him a lot. I'm not ever going to vote for him for president, but I think he does bring some unique perspectives and thinks about things a little differently than some of the other candidates have. So he is sometimes nice to have on stage.
That's true, yeah. Did you want to kick anyone out to right? You said
I said if I had to, I'd kick out Castro
and Klobuchar. I like Castro this time.
Yeah, I know. And Klobuchar isn't really much more offensive than the bottom 6 maybe, because I just think Yang's a little different. You know, next debate is, I think, in a month.
Mm-hmm.
I have to look up the exact dates of that. I'm sure we'll do another one of these after that. But we actually know, and I said that should be said too, we actually know that the cutoff for the next debate was the same as this debate. You had to raise a certain amount of money. You had to have a certain number, a percentage in recognized polls, so on and so forth. It's exactly the same for the next debate. But is it Tom Sayers? What's his name?
I'm not certain.
Yeah. But we know.
Oh, Tom Sayers. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's
Yeah,
going to be in the next
he
one.
made the cutoff.
Oh, did he? Okay.
So, and I'm sorry, I'm even blanking on his name now. But yeah, he has made the cutoff. So there will actually be at least 11 in the next debate, where there are only 10 here. Who knows? He hasn't been in a debate yet, so maybe will be interesting. I don't hold out any high hopes. But it is possible too. I don't think we've reached that cutoff yet, that someone else may get back in there, whether that be Gabbard or someone who has a rise. I think there's a couple of other newcomers I'm not even thinking about. There is a comedian who's running who has nothing, anything, and hasn't gotten into any debates, but it'd be funny to have him in.
Could be. I mean, you'd think that would be better in a Republican. But
Throw him in with the Republicans.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so we're thinking Warren, Sanders, and who did we say for the third?
For
The winners?
For the winners, Warren, Sanders, and
Like maybe just Warren and Sanders.
Biden didn't seem to do exceptionally well. Yang had really good points and a couple that just were weird.
Yeah.
Harris did not come out to me anymore. I know she did a little better for you this time. She did not do anything more for me than she did last time.
She didn't look as tired to me.
She looked tired though. She did
She
really
did?
look
Oh, okay.
tired.
I guess I didn't. I had
maybe
a
had different impressions. Booker, I thought, did better.
Booker did better. Mayor Pete did better. I think they all did better. They're more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think maybe they've done this enough that they're used to it.
Exactly. So I guess that's it. Our winners are Warren and Sanders.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. If you like this, hit the like button and the subscribe button, please, if you want to subscribe to our channel. If you want to get notifications each time we post, go ahead and hit that little bell on your screen. And until next time, I think...
Yeah, remember to exit stage left.
All right. We'll see you later.